Welcome back to episode number 11 of the Infinity One podcast. I'm here with my partner DJ Ryan from Infinity Development, and today we're going to be covering a very important topic that is much needed all across the United States and the world in general, and that is affordable housing. We're going to be talking about innovation capital and the future of affordable housing development. So, across California and much of the US, there are countless families that are being forced to choose between rent and basics, such as food, healthcare, and transportation. Many of them, they're being misplaced, and others are being left without a home. But what if I told you guys that the future of affordable housing wasn't just in politics, but it's all in innovation, new innovation, capital structure, and execution? First off, I just want to start off by laying some framework and some groundwork and some history. The US, it's in the middle of a severe housing affordability crisis, largely due to a supply shortage that is very difficult to address in timely manner with the regular traditional subsidies and construction methods. Today, home building still relies predominantly on the traditional site build construction process. And this is bad because we're facing many issues within the construction industry right now. However, the on-site construction industry, it features growing productivity inefficiencies, as I mentioned before, due to lots of fragmentation and it being an archaic industry in general. And there's a critical shortage of skilled construction as well. In addition, construction costs, they all have increased over time, making it even more challenging for affordable housing developers to build new units and build new affordable housing to the market, especially in high cost areas when you take a look at expensive markets such as New York and Los Angeles as well. The high cost of building new housing, it's driven by several factors, and these can all be grouped into three categories, which are construction inputs, such as the land, the materials, and the labor, which is getting more expensive day by day. Also, the land use regulations, which all have dramatically limited both the location and the scale of new housing. And third, it's the financial complexity. The financial complexity when it comes to affordable housing is huge. There are countless developers who are looking at different sources of funding, which is something that we're going to touch on later in this podcast, but it's incredible. This all includes the timing and uncertainty, which is bad because it's all around securing and layering various public subsidies in order to produce affordable housing units. So this crisis, you guys, it's completely not new. It's been here for decades, but we're at a tipping point now, especially in California. The construction costs, they're up 36.5% in just 3 years within California. And in LA specifically, it's off the charts. Red tape, especially in highly regulated areas such as Los Angeles, they clog every single step of development process. And despite a growing population, we're building fewer homes than we ever did in 1982. So the question, you guys, then becomes how do we build faster, smarter, and more affordably? So now I'm going to pass it on over to DJ where he can cover the macro environment in terms of affordable housing development.
Yeah, so here in California as a whole state, which is obviously a large state, we're required at least 3.5 million additional homes to meet this housing crisis demand. And when we think about how many homes we have produced, at least just in the LA County, in the last year, about 2024, we've only maybe reached 100,000. And I think understanding that we are barely putting a dent in this housing shortage as a whole state is a huge issue. I think there is something to say about kind of merging Southern California and Northern California, hopefully, to help tackle this shortage because in having Los Angeles be one of the biggest economies in the world, it shouldn't be as much of an issue as it is to create affordable housing for its residents and the greater California as a whole. And I think something that is starting to get talked about more and is one of the reasons outside of maybe creative financing or public sector roles that are prohibiting this is the growing NIMBYism, especially in the Los Angeles area. I think in a lot of the wealthier areas, people are not wanting to have any sort of multifamily housing, and we're not asking to build huge skyscrapers in most suburban towns, but I think the idea of having a duplex, a small duplex, or a fourplex or something like that, I think is something that needs to be thought about and implemented. But however, in these wealthier areas, it's being redlined. It's not there, whether it's through zoning, it's through city government elections. People in these wealthier areas are consistently denying any form of duplex building in their neighborhoods. And I think that's going to consistently hurt the shortage, because if we can't build in areas that are wealthy outside of our basic, maybe more urban, low income areas, there's going to be a lack of housing no matter what. And I think when we think about median home prices in California as well, outside of the multifamily market, it's surpassing, an average of 700, 800,000, which is more than double the national average. That goes to show that even just the ability to afford a single family home anywhere in California is a huge issue. Most people aren't going to be able to afford that, especially with how salaries are and how they're picking up with inflation. They're not matching. So if salaries aren't matching with inflation, it's not going to allow people to have a single job that's maybe not the highest paid and be able to afford a home. Also, thinking about the median rents for a two-bedroom apartment, in most urban areas, it's around $30,000 monthly. And it's kind of that same issue of, if your salary isn't picking up with increased rent rates, you're not going to be able to afford a decent apartment. And kind of going back to this NIMBYism, it's a housing issue, but it's also an economic issue, right? Thinking about, mid-tier homes price increasing 82% since 2020, but hourly wages only growing 24%. There needs to be a match in a salary for the average American and the low-income American to be able to afford any type of house or even an apartment at that. And when there's such a large inequity in salary and in the ability to afford a home, that's going to continuously increase the homelessness crisis. That's going to continuously hurt our low income and minority populations who are often working jobs that are lower paying. In the Los Angeles area specifically, this city is short about 270,000 affordable homes. And for the whole county, we need about 500,000. And thinking about how Los Angeles County being such a huge populous area, if LA County can be able to really make a dent in this affordable housing shortage, I think there's a great chance that it spreads to the rest of the state.
Completely agreed. That's a really, really great point. I think LA would be a great starting point for us to tackle this big affordability crisis because LA is one of the largest economies and it's in the middle of everything that's going to be happening soon. We have all these big events coming up in the future within 3 years, and LA is going to be at the epicenter of everything. And if we don't really tackle this housing affordability crisis with new models, new ways of thinking, and new innovation, then we're really just going to be left behind. And I just don't see a way out at the moment. It's going to be really hard. It goes back to the notion that we've always talked about, and something that we really learned at the LABC event, which is the concept of forced collaboration and how we need everyone just to come together to really tackle this crisis that we're facing. And now, when it comes to funding these projects and looking at the sources of capital, the sources of equity, and the sources of debt that we're getting, it's huge. Affordable housing development, the capital stack, it's insane. I know countless developers that have gone months just on spending money on pre-development costs because of how risky it is to build, the high cost of construction, and all the regulations that you need to overcome just to build affordable housing, which it shouldn't be that way because affordable housing, it helps solve the housing crisis. It doesn't hurt it. So I don't know why there's so much regulation, but let's just talk about capital, you guys. The traditional funding models, they don't work for most affordable housing projects. This is where you really need to look at the concept of blended capital stacks, which is where you mix a combination of different funding sources, such as federal subsidies, state and local funding, private equity, mission driven capital, and even philanthropy as well. And even if we're going more on the innovative side, you can maybe even look at some venture capital funding as well. There is a super important note, and this is like a really big concept that was spoken about at the LABC event. And it's a really cool statistic that I found at the Turner Center at UC Berkeley, which focuses specifically on affordable housing development. And that is that the inclusion, this is what they note, that the inclusion of one additional public funding source, it adds on average 4 months to the timeline of being able to start construction. And that's associated with an increase of approximately $20,000 in per unit total development costs. Now, when you look at this on the entire performa and you look at this for bigger projects that are anywhere from 100 to 200 to 300 units that are specifically all affordable housing, it's going to ruin your performa, and this is why your deals don't end up penciling out because there's so much catching up to do. And it's incredible. There needs to be some sort of fix to this because this right now, there's lots of fragmentation within this. And this is something that we aim to tackle within our projects that we aim to do in the future. But obviously, it all takes time, one step at a time. So this is basically one of the issues that we're looking at solving and seeing how we can be innovative while also being mission driven at the same time in solving this issue. And then when you look at other projects, such as Project Roomkey, which was originally funded by COVID relief dollars, they've now expanded over to $300 million in state funds. And this is, you guys, clear proof that flexible capital models, they can scale impact as well. The most effective deals today, they involve capital layering, such as LIHTC, which is low income housing tax credits for equity sourcing, your mission driven debt from CDFIs or social lenders, and your philanthropic capital in order to de-risk the entire capital stack. And then you can also look at modular or infill construction loans from forward-thinking lenders such as the Housing Acceleration Fund. And this is something that we need to make a rule. So we need to be really, 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 attached to this model of blended financing and seeing different ways of how we can force collaborate the capital stack and just, really push the projects forward because at the rate we're going now, it's not looking too good, especially with all the new events coming up and the severe housing shortage that we're facing now, and even more with the recent LA fires. So, yeah, now DJ can speak on the next section.
Yeah, for sure. I think Sue said something really good about modular housing that maybe we'll talk about in another podcast. But I think that's definitely a way that can improve the construction costs and help bump up this affordable housing development. For me, I think when Zeus mentioned briefly about LIHTC, and I think obviously LIHTC has been involved in most affordable housing projects. However, I think it's obvious that it's not right. It's lacking, right? It's not the perfect system, and I think that's where understanding public and private partnerships come into play. That we can't solely rely on government HUD programs, LIHTC, to fund our whole affordable housing projects. There has to be private money that comes in, which we'll talk about in more specificity later, and just understanding that there's other ways through public and private partnerships, through the bond market, that these projects can be financed without trying to put all these applications through the government. Because as we said, right, one additional source of funding from a public subsidy increases 4 months. So trying to think about getting as much affordable housing developments out as fast as possible. Going the public sector route is not going to be ideal in terms of building time, but I think there's been examples throughout LA of companies that are starting to build without public subsidies. And I think part of the issue with even why we need to go into the private market, I mean, is just the infrastructure as a whole. I think the infrastructure takes a long time to change and develop. Real estate is a long aging industry, and I think for financing to make change and to be innovative, it takes time and it takes results. And so I think as slowly as AI starts to develop and starts to help in the process of modeling, the process of construction with modular homes, I think it'll take time to get the public sector where we need it in terms of its its streamlined process for funding and for permitting projects. But I think my biggest thing is just the couple zoning reforms I think that are taking place in California that are going to be really important for the development of affordable housing. I spoke on a little bit about the lack of duplexes being built in suburban neighborhoods, but with SB 9, it legalizes duplexes and a lot of splits in single family zones. And I think that's something that's super important. That's going to be able to double the thing about if we have single family homes in one neighborhood, if you just at least split the lots in half of those, right, we're almost doubling the amount of homes, and it can be more affordable because we're having right two homes on the same lot, and it can be a great starter family home. And I think that's where a lot of the market is missing, right? A lot of our more senior people in our society have had home ownership or have had a apartment or a house that they're renting and have been able to develop that income, and came from an era where one job that was decently paying was enough to pay for a home. But for us and for the younger generation, that's hasn't been as much possible, right? Where people are getting paid six figures and still having to live with roommates in an apartment. And I think understanding that these duplexes and splits and single family lots are going to be able to hit the exact market of young people straight out of college and their first jobs, or a first starter family home. I think this is exactly the market it's going to hit and be able to improve. Um, and I think also AB 1033 allowing homeowners to sell newly built ADUs as condominiums is kind of in that same realm as SB 9, right? Allowing the younger generations who have places to live without having to pay for a full home, because a lot of times it's not even possible, especially in California specifically. I think this is more of a California issue. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. The prices, the median home price in California has gone up astronomically. I was actually speaking to a developer yesterday, and he said his rent back in the day, and I think the 1980s, 1985, it used to be $300 a month, which is crazy because now it's astronomical. Even for a small apartment, you're paying like 5,000. So,
Yeah, like 3,000, basically 3,000. Yeah.
mhm.
And
And
we see
this,
that here.
yeah,
That's how expensive apartments are just to get a student housing apartment around our campus.
yeah, especially now. So, I really want to talk about. DJ kind of mentioned the concept of modular construction, which is something huge within affordable housing development. Construction's a really really big component. We want to be able to reduce the construction costs as much as we can, and modular construction is one of the best ways. It's not just about financing, you guys, it's about how we build. And there's three concepts that I want to speak to you about within the modular construction industry, which is planning for the future, the ease of permitting, and designing with ease. So when it comes to planning for the future, modular construction, there's nowhere for it to go but only up, you guys. One of the most important advantages is the ability to achieve economies of scale, because within modular construction, you're essentially building like Lego bricks that you can build offsite, and then you transport them over to the site, and then you just layer them and stack them one on top of the other. And that allows for greater economies of scale, faster build times, and large volumes of housing to be deployed all across the country at any given time. And because of this, it's going to be easier for affordable housing developers to construct their, not necessarily, even it can be bigger units, but in DJ's case, when we're looking at these smaller middle market affordable housing developments or even infill developments, it's going to be way easier for us to do this. But obviously, it's going to take a lot of forced collaboration too, because a lot of people, they're against this concept because it hasn't really been proven out. It's still in the testing phase and whatnot, but the future is bright, and that is something that DJ and I are both extremely bullish on for the future. And then we
Okay.
also have the ease of permitting, which is, it's going to be less because, let me read my notes. It says the city or the local council, they can review the processes faster because the state process is quicker because it's already been approved by the state in essence. So you don't need to go to multiple jurisdictions, but then at the same time, it's difficult because when you go to the main jurisdictions, they might be opposed to it. So it's still a ballpark and we're still up in the air regarding the modular construction. But when it comes to designing with ease, this is another really good sweet spot because when we look at these different AI um, technologies that are coming out in terms of construction, such as, you can look at Generate, you can look at Archistar and whatnot. They can all design these housing projects at ease with AI, like in seconds, right? And when it comes to developing these affordable projects, that's what you need. You need speed and you need clarity. And if you can use these different AI innovations to create all of them in a quick method and in a fast method that's going to be reliable and already guaranteed by the city, then that's going to be your green light for you to go forward with your development project. So that's another big reason as to why we are bullish on the modular construction industry and something that we hope to incorporate within us because it's very accurate. Through BIM, which is your building information modeling, we can all have this set out to be super, super efficient. And if we have the how do I say this? If we have the construction portion already set, then it's going to be easy going from the pre-development over to the construction and the lease out. because it's going to be a swift transition. And within affordable housing development, what we truly need is speed. We can't be waiting 4 months for like public, for an extra sources of funding, or we can't be waiting months for the construction to occur, because at the same time, these developers are losing out on millions of dollars, which if we don't do this fast, it's the issue of affordable housing in general. It's not going to get solved in the first place. So that is one aspect as to how modular construction can help us speed up this process of affordable housing development.
Yeah, I think I would like to kind of talk a little bit more about some examples of some innovative financing that's happening, especially in California, and some examples of how this turn into the bond market, I think, is really starting to expand. So, in the Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, there's been established a California Green Bond Market Development Committee. And the purpose of this committee is to expand financing for climate friendly infrastructure through green bonds. And kind of what that means is the new developments, as long as they are meeting sustainable requirements, they're good for the environment, which is obviously something that me and Zeus really want to adhere to in Infinity Development, having sustainable green development. I think the fact that there's now a committee that's creating a bond market around this is not only good for the environment, but good for the housing market. We can now, developers will now want to prioritize some sustainability and some ESG requirements to be able to qualify for these bonds. And although people may not care about sustainability as much currently, as more housing is starting to develop, we have to think about the effects on the environment. And the fact that this committee is going to be a leader in this financing aspect is going to be really key. And I think also some tax exempt housing bonds that are really key are the mortgage revenue bonds and multifamily housing bonds in California. And according to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, these are financing low income mortgages for home ownership or the development of affordable rental housing. And the fact that we're getting creative financing that's tax exempt, which is encouraging developers to be a part of this multifamily and this affordable home building, should only make this financing and the ability to develop easier. It's kind of getting away from that public sector and starting to go into that bond market that should help speed up the development process. And I think thinking about bond structures, right? Maybe thinking about getting some more variable rate bonds, different ways to mix up the coupon rates, maybe not a traditional, right, monthly interest payment out bond, but maybe either a principal payment at the end, being able to creatively finance and using banks, municipal groups to really help developers get into the affordable space and have proper financing, and using new affordable housing models, which I know the Turner Center has been a leader in, I think is only going to increase the market over time.
Completely agreed with what DJ said about everything from the bond market over to the ESG sustainability side. So here at Infinity Development, something that we're really prioritizing is green building, smart cities, and sustainable developments. And if we can manage to tap in and combine these aspects of affordable housing over with sustainable communities and sustainable living, that's obviously going to be a great segue as to how we can create better cities, more affordable housing, and how we can really go back to this notion of forced collaboration, because everyone at the end of the day, they want more housing and they want to leave an impact on this world with sustainability, because we only have one earth on this planet, you guys. So we really just want to see how we can at the same time give back to the earth, and that's done through these different sustainability models, whether it's having your highest ESG lead rating, I mean, it's which is lead silver and lead certified. And then it can also be tied back to having, what would it be, high efficient HVAC systems and whatnot. So that's just something that we obviously hope to incorporate in the future. And if we really want, you guys, this is just kind of to wrap up now. If we really want affordable housing in general to scale, especially in highly regulated areas such as California, we need to think like entrepreneurs and execute like developers, because developers, they have the capital, they have the money, they have the financing, they have all the resources. But what a lot of them are lacking is the entrepreneurial spirit and seeing how we can truly force collaborate all the different partners and all the different organizations within the city to tackle this one issue, which is huge. Because we need to focus on solutions and not the problem, and seeing how we can all come together as one. Because there's no straightforward answer as to how we can solve this issue. DJ and I, we have big aspirations, but it's going to take a lot, because this issue, it's large, it's institutional, and it's something that we truly need to tackle. Because innovative software, they're all helping, but at the same time, we really need to be one with the city, be one with the state, be one with the jurisdictions, be one with the community as well. Because at the end of the day, the community, that's when what they say goes. If they don't really approve our projects, then our projects are not going to go anywhere. So at the end of the day, it's not just about the funding. It's not just about new innovations we can use, such as modular construction, prefabricated construction and whatnot. It's all about execution, the notion of forced collaboration, stability, dignity, and the ability for us to create a better life for all the citizens, which are in Los Angeles and the entire world. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Great closeout, Zeus. And I just want to say real quick, yeah, like you said, it's institutional, right? It's not just a housing issue, it's also an economic issue. It's also a zoning issue, right? Understanding that most groups that need affordable housing, whether it's apartments, duplexes, split lots, or low income people who end up being minorities, and understanding that zoning laws, especially in wealthy neighborhoods, are prohibiting this is just another form of redlining, in my opinion. I think making this both a public sector, a governmental issue, an economic issue to really bring that collaboration together through all these groups is key for the proper change.
sounds good. So, thank you guys for tuning into this episode, and we will see you guys promptly shortly. We're going to be talking about modular construction within our next episode and how we can really see new innovations within the construction industry. Because, as we said, construction is one of the biggest impactors of development in general, especially in affordable housing and these big sustainable projects. So, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you guys.